Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. John chapter 20, verse 29. In the words that Jesus spoke to Thomas, I don't think that Jesus meant that Thomas and those who had seen and believed were not blessed. They were, but Thomas vowed not to believe unless he put his finger into Christ's nail-driven hands and reached into his wounded side. Thomas was certainly blessed because Jesus appeared to him and presented himself for examination. Jesus knew Thomas's doubt. Thus, Christ appearing to him is surely an illustration of God's effectual call and election. There is no coaxing God to act. Christ's appearing was an act of mercy. He didn't have to appear. Of course, Thomas, realizing his unbelief and the shame of his demand, exclaimed, "My Lord and my God!" Although it was not stated, I can imagine Thomas kneeling before Christ on the floor, his head sunk into his hands, sobbing, as Jesus stood over him and ever so softly brushed his hair on his head, which his father kept count. I can also imagine that Jesus looked up as he did when he set his face towards Jerusalem days earlier, looked past the others in the room and gazed into the future where he saw 2,000 years later my unbelieving face and sinful figure cowered in the corner of an unbelieving world. As for blessing us who did not see him or who did not witness the events that led to his death, I ask, what was your first thought when you read this verse? It might have been a split-second reaction, perhaps more of a feeling than a thought. You might have experienced a moment of deep personal satisfaction, as if you knew what Thomas came to know, or in a moment's guilt you didn't know at all. Since humans share much of what we are, think, and act in common, I can imagine some of the reactions. No, I wouldn't have demanded what Thomas did. I'm a student of Christian apologetics. That is not to say that I believe that we have anything for which to apologize. But I have done sufficient research into the matter of the resurrection to know it is a factual, historical event. Another might have thought, I was born in the church, baptized as a child. My parents provided my instruction and taught me what happened to Thomas. I believed what they said because that is what they taught me. He replied and then hesitated after remembering something else. Oh, doubting Thomas. Yes, that's right. My mother told me not to be one, and she certainly didn't want me to give her a Judas kiss when I asked for another cookie. Another still with a touch of embarrassment. I'm a Christian, but I can't say that I'm familiar with the story. It's been so long since I read the Bible. I just think if it was that important, the pastor would have covered it in church. I mean, last week he covered something very, very important, global warming. And yet another person at first sheepishly answered, but then his countenance brightened. Yes, I experienced that moment. I cannot begin to tell you how distressed I was. I thought I was a Christian all along, but there was a day, yes, a particular day that I faced the enormity of my sin and thinking about the suffering that I caused because of my pride and selfishness. I couldn't take it any longer. It was only then that I found myself in the upper room and realized his visitation. Something happened, inside me. But I realized that I hadn't believed at all. I was just like Thomas. Here, I thought I had walked and talked with him, shared the communion table, but I hadn't. The point is that each of us must have shared to some extent of experience what I call the Thomas moment. That is, we did if we were effectually called. Paul on the road to Damascus, Peter realizing that he had denied Christ thrice, and then seeing Jesus look at him from across what had then been a terrible, helpless expanse of the high priest's courtyard. Mary Magdalene, confused, alone, and who unknowingly met and spoke with Jesus outside the tomb. For everyone that is blessed today and who did not live then to see, please don't suggest that you didn't have your own solitary meeting with Christ. Each of us who call upon the name of the Lord has had a very special, private, and personal moment that we first spent with our resurrected Savior and Lord. Oh, we may not have felt much at the time of that initial meeting. The sweetness of his presence might have then extinguished all of our fear and doubts. For others, there might have been watershed tears, quaking, or cries of agony sent heavenward immediately before his sweet arrival, as I'm sure the disciples felt before meeting him in Galilee, or as Thomas in the upper room. On the other hand, Thomas, upon seeing Jesus, might as well have cried out, "My Lord and my God," in simple obedience and humble recognition. I don't know. But I do know that what happened with Thomas should be true of us. There came that singular moment when we knew the reality of the person of Christ, not the story, what was said, or what was heard. We sought him, not the benefits, and experienced the vitality, forgiveness, and removal of all guilt, and were in possession of a renewed life. He brought those to us as a housewarming gift, even as he entered to dwell and take up residence in our hearts and minds. As for the blessing that he promised that day, well, for me it was realized when he introduced himself to me, a sinner who lived in a dark world and hid in shadowy places, who was dead and a child of disobedience. Yes, there in the upper room. May God meet you, too, in his upper room.